Well, hey there, this is Jerry, and let's get started on another episode of What's Broke Today. And today is kind of a redo episode because you see, I got a power steering pump here, and anybody that has watched my other videos saw where I put the power steering pump on the '01 Chevrolet Duramax, that the pump was leaking, and part of the leak was missing the bolts in the back. Well, I'm having to replace the pump again because I got a pump that at idle didn't produce enough pressure to operate the power steering system. Because, say if the engine was at 1,100 RPMs, power steering, power brakes were just fine. If it got down around, 650, 700, the power steering went to glitchy. And if I was turning, I could just turn the wheel and step on the brake and affect the power steering because the fluid pressure would drop so low. But the main thing is, since I had to have it apart again, I went ahead and dug through my stash of stuff and found an old power steering pump, and this is off of some kind of small block Chevy. Probably, a truck, I'm guessing. I don't actually remember what I took it off of. But I believe that I can, have my impact going the right way. It gets me the correct hardware to put on that pump with these stud bolts that go in the back. Get the nuts out of there. And of course, let's see. Yep. I think those are bigger than 15 millimeter. Oh. Another sign where I don't bend as good as I used to. So that's a 15. Of course, the nuts were a 15. Let's just come up here, and because I'm near my standard size sockets, now 11/16 fits. Because I'm thinking it's standard threads on the inside. So, and I got cats here coming out to help. I get a deep well, because a short one pops right off. Okay, there we go. We'll set that down there, and then I got trouble here at my feet. So yeah, there we go with those. And then I can set that aside because I don't even remember what that motor was out of. But and of course we got two different ones. One of them just got a thin nut. The other one's got the thin nut, and it looks like a spacer on there, but I think it is part of the bolt. And the long one goes on the bottom, the short one goes on the top. And of course, they thread in without any problem. Let me tighten these up. Okay. I'm going to finish getting this ready and get it back on the truck. And then we'll retest it. And then I'll walk you through what I did, as far as how I tested this, since I did not have a pressure gauge. But I'll explain, if you had the pressure gauge, what you should do. And then since I didn't have one, what I did do. Okay, I was talking about testing on this truck. That general overview of the system is, got the power steering pump, which pumps hydraulic fluid up And the first place it comes is up to the hydro boost unit. And of course, there is a return line from the hydro boost that goes back to the pump on the back side for when you let off the brakes. But then the fluid also continues out this other pipe and goes down, which we can't see from here, but it ends up down there on the steering gear. And of course, you got the return line that comes from the steering gear back up to the pump. And when you're trying to figure out which part is bad, we got to look. Now, when we're talking about how, to diagnose the system, we got to look at what works and what don't, and when it works and when it don't. Because when the truck arrived here initially, I didn't go drive it, but he wasn't complaining about any braking problems or steering problems. He just complained about putting fluid in it all the time. So of course I replaced the pump, and after I put the pump on, I went to go drive it, just see how everything was working. And the hydro boost actually will store some energy from the pump. So when I would drive and go to stop, if I stepped on the pedal and kept constant pressure, it seemed like I stopped really well. But then as soon as I get down, say below 10 miles an hour, I could not. I mean, it was all I could do to turn the steering wheel. So I did not have a pressure gauge, because if I'd had a pressure gauge, I would have come up there where the pump hose, pressure hose hooks to the hydro boost, and tapped in and monitored pressure there to make sure I was even getting good pressure to the hydro boost. Because if I don't get it there, I'm not getting it at the gear. But I didn't have a gauge. So what I did, I got driving down, found a nice straight piece of road that's flat, where there's very little traffic, get going about 55 miles an hour, kick the truck up into neutral, and then step on the brake, and then I pump it 2 or 3 times, and I could tell by the time I got to the third and fourth pump, I wasn't getting very effective braking from the hydro boost. Not to mention, when I got slowed down enough to turn, I couldn't turn the steering wheel. But as soon as I gave it a little bit of throttle and got the engine RPMs up over 1,000, then the brakes came back and the steering came back. And as soon as I'd let off of it and the RPMs would go back down around 650, 700, then I'd lose power steering. I'm going to guess it worked good when it was cold out there on the power steering, because the fluid was thicker. After I drove and warmed it up and it thinned out a little, the pump wasn't supplying good pressure. So I just went ahead, since I didn't have a gauge, pump was under warranty, I yanked the pump off, took it up, exchanged it, because I hadn't even been on the truck 2 weeks. So put the pump on, bled everything out, filled it, which I still, once it cools off, I want to check it again. But I took it and drove it a second time, and I did the same thing I did the very first time, was drove up the road about 1.5 miles, and there's a driveway that goes off a curve that's real wide that I can pull off and do a U-turn without having to stop and back up, or so I could pull in there and basically pull straight back out into the road and head back toward home. So I got down there, stopped. As soon as I got off the pavement, steering wheel turned good. So I drove on up about another, 3 or 4 miles farther out, and did some more stopping and turning, and also went to that place where I'd done it before and redone the test I did when it wasn't working right. It passed everything with flying colors. So yeah, it just shows you, and that, I say new, that was a remanufactured pump, and I believe it was remanufactured by a company called Cardone. I don't know where they do their stuff at, but I'm not always a big fan of remanufactured things because I don't think they properly test them after they remanufacture them, or maybe they don't have a way to, but they should be able to have something they can put that on, put a pulley on it, spin it, and check the pressure output. Because I would almost bet that if I'd have had a pressure gauge at idle, I doubt I was getting 50 pounds of pressure out of that pump. And I have to, memory serves me, I think probably on the lowest acceptable on this is around 100, but I think they're looking about 125 to 150 pounds per square inch pressure coming out of that pump at idle. And if you deadhead the pump, I think we're looking for it to actually, for it bypasses the pressure valve in the pump to be between 14 and 1500 pounds of pressure. So I just need to break down and buy me a gauge because it sure would have made figuring this out a lot easier. But of course, I don't got one, but I will probably buy one because I really could have used it checking out this truck. But I'll say, but we get back to, if you have a gauge, you can put it on the hose in between the hydro boost and the pump and check your overall pump output pressure. And then you can move over and actually put it on the hose going from the hydro boost down to the gear and make sure you're getting the proper pressure through the hydro boost and down to the pump. Because, if you lose any, if you're leaking inside the hydro boost unit and it's bypassing going back to the pump without sending it through the steering gear, you're going to have bad steering probably all the time. Or, say if you have good pressure coming out of the hydro boost going to the steering gear and your steering doesn't work good, you probably got bad valving in the steering gear and it'll need replacement. Even though most of the time on these kind of trucks, that steering gear starts leaking out the input seal from the steering column and dripping usually before the actual valving in the steering gear goes bad. So, but it's just a matter of process of elimination going through there just to make sure that, you identify the actual source of the problem instead of just throwing a bunch of parts at it. So, but other than that, I think I'll wrap this one up because I guess I got to add up his bill and I got everything done on this truck, so it's ready to go home. So I'm going to go add everything up and call him and we'll get this thing down the road and move on to something new. That, hey, I do appreciate you watching. I do love those thumbs up for the likes, even though I don't know if they really make any difference to anybody. I do appreciate those comments. That got a couple comments or questions I need to address on. I may actually have to make a video on one of them because it'd be easier to do a video than it will be to try and explain or answer his question that way. But yeah, that's something a lot of times I don't get to them as quick as I should. So I apologize for that. But I'll say, I hope you did enjoy the video. And I'll say, if you're not a subscriber, feel free to join on in because they'll tell them what else you're going to see on What's Broke Today. Thank you.